It's an era of change, of ideals and cultures constantly colliding. We need brave people who will find the way of hope in the chaos, who will elevate truth in their speech and activate reform in their lives. Leigh Sloan welcomes you to this brave nation.
Hello, I'm Leigh Sloan, back with you today after a several months break in podcasting. So what have I been up to? Well, we've done a lot of things this summer. We've expanded our hybrid learning community called the Green Room here in Anchorage to 2 campuses. And it's very exciting, but also challenging at the same time. We have also launched our brand new nonprofit, Alaska School Choice, which I'll be sharing more with you because we're having our annual Alaska School Choice Expo like we always do in January 2025. So go to alaskaschoolchoice.com to learn more and to support what we're doing. And over the summer, I have also been honored to win the Most Inspiring Woman Award, which was very exciting. But even more exciting, I think, was to see so many impacted by my book, Pride and Privilege, Expand Your Influence in Cultural Chaos. Now, if you haven't gotten a copy of the book, I would love for you to go on there onto Amazon.com, find my book, Pride and Privilege, Expand Your Influence in Cultural Chaos, and I would love to know what you think. If you want to get a signed copy, you can actually go to bravenation.online and I will personally sign that copy for you. You know, Pride and Privilege is a very meaty book. At the same time, it's accessible, it has stories, it's easy to read, but it's going to be something you want to go through over again and see that you're applying the principles. So I'm actually going to start a class. I want to create a class around this called Cultural Architects. And I'm going to be developing that in the new year. If you want to be a part of that, just stay tuned. I would love for you to be a part of that. And get signed up on bravenation.online to learn more. There are so many more other things that I'd like to share with you, but I'm going to leave that to my next podcast. Today, I'm honored to share with you some insights that I got from Alaska State Senator Shelley Hughes on some important season election topics. Now, whether you're from Alaska or you're from outside Alaska, it doesn't matter. These are going to be really interesting topics for you today. So let's dive in. Well, hello, Brave Nation. I'm excited to start a new season of Brave Nation, and we are launching back in very strong. I'm excited for all the guests that we're going to have on this season, and we are starting with Senator Shelley Hughes from Alaska. She is one of our state senators, and what I really appreciate about Shelley is not only is she an advocate for things I really strongly believe in, like school choice and other things, but she also knows how to treat people. And that's what we talk about at Brave Nation is how to have a brave conversation, how to communicate with people on the other side. And I've never heard her, and I'm sure she's tempted to sometimes, but act unbecomingly toward people that she disagrees with. She stands for truth 100%, but she also brings that spirit of love and consensus building and unity building that I love. So thank you, Senator Hughes, for coming on our podcast today.
Oh, thank you, and you're welcome, and I'm happy to be part of it because I think you have an important message for Alaskans, for Americans to hear the importance of civility and to communicate and not get in our own little boxes and stay in them, but really have conversations. And it really, I've always told people that I learn more from people that disagree with me than with people who agree with me. So it's a good exercise, and we need to learn how to do it with civility.
Isn't that what our country kind of was founded on, like the idea that we would have these conversations, and that I think democracy, the idea of democracy or representative government was all about, the fact that we would be having these conversations, and they kind of assumed that we would be. And I think some of that has broken down, which is why it seems like our political systems seem to be breaking down a little bit. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I would say along those lines, people on one side of an issue or another, and the more extreme they might be on that one side or the other, the thought of compromising, they don't like that idea. And I actually don't really like the word compromise. I like to call it building consensus. And in building consensus, you're finding points of agreement with the people who are on the opposite side of the issue. And you're finding those points that don't forsake your values.
Yeah.
And you build on that. And that's what we need to do more. And it is exactly our constitutional republic is founded on that idea. Our government legislative bodies, whether at the Congress level or at the state legislative level or at our city councils or boroughs or county governments, it is built on um, that principle that you've got to be able to come together and get things done by finding those points of consensus.
Yeah. And we have to, I talk about this a little bit in my book, Pride and Privilege. We have to, it's hard to have a conversation. We can't even agree on what truth is, that even truth exists, that it's not something that's, your truth and my truth. That it's actually objective. And I think that's something we used to know, that there is objective truth. And now that's up for debate, whether it's objective or not. And so that's why I think maybe the way we have conversations needs to change a little bit. I think there might be better ways to do it, but I'm sure in the legislature, it's a little different dynamic there, isn't it?
It is. I was probably the best example. I was on two different groups that were asked to come up with a proposal as far as our fiscal situation. And each of the groups were composed of people from all sides of the aisle, from both the House and the Senate, the majority, the minority in each body. And it was well balanced in that way, and people had different ideas. And the first group didn't get very far because it didn't sift down to find out what can we actually agree on, didn't do enough work to get to that. The second group, we actually did come up with a full proposal. But because the rest of the legislature didn't come along on that journey and go through the process, it was hard for them to accept it. And also at the time, there was a particular group, different individuals who chaired different committees who particularly, and it was actually just a handful. I remember we reconvened in my office a couple times as a group once we brought the plan forward. And we were hearing lots of support in both chambers, House and majority, but there was a handful, I don't remember what the count was. It was maybe 7 or 9 people who were very resistant, but they happened to chair the very committees that would be involved in moving something through. And without their support, you couldn't get it anywhere. So, but it was a fascinating process because the people in the group, we were diametrically opposed on many issues, other issues outside of the fiscal environment.
Right.
But even within the fiscal realm, there were a lot of disagreements, and yet we worked through it. And I think that's a good exercise, and we cannot dig our heels in, and we have to be willing to, like I said, find those points of agreement and work from there, which means finding the truth, like you said, what can we agree on as truth on this matter?
Right. And I'm sure there is a line though that you have, right? That maybe you have it preconceived in your mind, like I'm not going to cross this line, but I'm willing to, compromise or build consensus around other areas.
Exactly. And I like to call those values because there may be some economic principle where things could go perhaps this way or that way, but on values, these are things that ground us. And so that's kind of the word I like to use, because I'm not going to compromise or forsake those values, but I can find things we can build on that do not forsake those values, right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So we are in a very interesting moment in this election, right? And it seems like a lot is at stake right now. And so how would you describe this moment in 2024 election season?
Well, I would say it is a defining moment as far as the direction. And we say that every time there's an election, this is the most important election of my life.
Sure.
But I think as we move through each one actually does become more important, because we've seen such a shift, a cultural shift in so many things. You mentioned, even defining objective truth. What is that? And we've seen a lot of relativism in society, in our country, and even in our state. And at the state level here, I've seen a real shift over the last decade. Certain things that we would have tremendous agreement, maybe probably a unanimous vote on. We do no longer have that.
Mm.
So, because I think some people's values have actually changed more. I look back when I very first stepped up to be in the role I am. I can pull out something from that was 12 years ago. I could pull out something, a bullet point of where I stood, and I'm still right there. I
Right.
think some people, if they pull out something from that long ago, they'd realize they've adjusted what they think about this or that. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, like I think a really good example is the whole what is a woman question, right?
yep, that definitely is, or
Yeah.
the definition of marriage. There's another one.
Mhm.
So right now, as we're leading into the election, that's one too, because we were talking about civility and the importance of civility, and so then we start talking about character and how people behave, how they interact, and then you compare that with policy, and I'm at the point in the presidential election, for instance, that I've got to put policy above personality.
Mhm.
And I of course we all want someone who is maybe behaves or speaks in a certain way, but
Mhm.
sometimes you don't always get everything in one package and you have
Mhm.
to go with the choices you have. But
Yeah.
I'm hoping still yet we can return to civility and model it at the state level. And we've got some great examples
Yeah.
out there, national leaders too, who do model it.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
not a lost cause. It's not a
Yeah.
lost cause.
I mean, and we've seen the violence that's been happening, the assassination attempts and stuff like that. Do you think that is going to continue until we find a different way as Americans? Do you see that getting
It's
worse?
fascinating, losing my voice a little bit here. When within the first 24 hours or so of each of those incidents, there was a lot of talk on both sides about cooling things down and toning down the rhetoric, but it didn't take but maybe 48 hours and it was right back up where it was. So
Right.
um, I think once the election is over, perhaps we'll come into, that'll level off a little bit and we can work on that. But I just think we need people that are thinking about it and striving to speak civilly to one another,
Mhm.
understanding that we're going to have vast differences on many points, but be
Yeah.
respectful. And you mentioned something, but you've never seen me not be like a stateswoman. Well, I don't know. I maybe cross the line. I know I'm right now, a big issue for us is the ranked choice voting and what's
Right.
happening. And
So let's explain that a little bit more for those who are not in Alaska and maybe haven't experienced ranked choice voting.
well, ranked choice voting is a system that was brought into our state. It was paid for, all the advertising and marketing, by outside money, which we call dark dollars. It wasn't transparent at the time. And the funny thing is, it only passed by 1% in Alaska, and it was primarily because the proposal that was a ballot initiative in 2020, it included not just a change in the voting system, but a little bit on campaign financing. And so the ads were talking about vote for this and get rid of dark money. And so
Mhm.
everybody thought, oh, I want to get rid of dark money, so I'll vote for this. They didn't realize those ads were being paid for by dark money. And
Yeah.
they've been traced to a number of outside groups, and they are openly very liberal in their causes, what they support. And so ranked choice voting is a system where you do not have a regular primary, Republican primary and Democrat primary. You have one primary, it's a jungle primary. Everybody's on the ballot. When the congressional seat was up last 2 years ago in 2022, what were there, 40 some
Oh
people
yeah. Maybe
on
50.
that
Yeah.
on that ballot for Congress. So you don't have the normal fine-tuned vetting in a primary. So it puts a lot on the voter, and it's one of the reasons I oppose it, because voters, they're savvy and they're smart and they care, but they also don't have hours and hours and hours to do the research and get up to speed on dozens of candidates. And so most of them will be aware and understand where, a handful of candidates stand. And that's the old standard ballot, one person, one vote. That's all you need to be prepared. Now we're asking them to be prepared to, even if you don't have 40, you have quite a few you need to decide at the jungle primary level. And then the way it works is that long list gets narrowed down to the top 4 vote getters, then move up to the general election. So it can be a mix. You could have a couple Democrats, a couple Republicans. You could have a Libertarian, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, but some combination of 4, and it moves up to the general election. And then it's a ranking. So you color in your circle for your first choice, you color in a circle for your second choice on down the line, or you can just vote for one. And it's caused a lot of confusion in our state. I've done a series of videos on my Senator Facebook page if anyone is interested. And one of the most troubling findings for me, and some of this research is out of Princeton University, is that it disenfranchises segments of our population, particularly senior citizens, English language learners, minorities, including in our state, Alaska Natives. So it is a more confusing system. I've sat in presentations, Leigh, where they presented how it works and how the tabulation works, and give sample ballots and let people do test runs, and it'll be like a 45-minute presentation on how that works. And I've been in a room where these were college-educated people, professionals. The 45-minute presentation ends, and there's another 45 minutes of questions because people are still confused. So you can understand somebody who doesn't speak English well, or
Right.
whatever, would have a little struggle. So what happens is these population segments, they show up in lower numbers. And the sad thing also is when some of them do show up, their ballots are often the ones that have errors and are discarded. So I think the simple 1 person, 1 vote is better. I will tell you why ranked choice voting is being promoted in our state. We're a cheap date. We
Yes.
have a very small media market. We only have 730,000 people, limited number of television, radio stations, newspapers. And so very easy to buy up the media market here at a low cost. And so these outside groups, we were really the guinea pig. And now on this election cycle, which I think this would be interesting for your listeners from other parts of the country,
Right.
because it's on the ballot in 4 states. It's on the ballot in Idaho,
And
Nevada, Colorado.
there are
one
other places where it's happening locally, you know.
Yes. And there's one state where they're going to, Missouri is making a decision whether they're going to preempt and not allow it. So it's being, it's on ballots in 6 states, including Alaska. So, but we were the ones that brought it in 4 years ago. We used it for the first time in 2022. So if we decide to repeal it and get rid of it, that's really going to look bad, right, for the people that are pushing it in these other states. But what it does, it's designed to, if a red state is, you have a conservative state that's red, the impact is that we'll make it less red, more purple, more blue. If you're a blue state, it'll do the opposite. It'll move you over to more purple, more red, because it's a mathematical thing. It's a statistical thing. It's a little in the weeds to explain, but I think it's important to know. So just let's just say it's a Democrat district, okay? Very leaning Democrat, and they will elect a Democrat. So the majority, the persons that have a majority political persuasion in that district are Democrats. Then you have a smaller number of persons with the minority political persuasion. Okay, so in that case, it'd be the Republican. So a Republican is going to get their ballot, and they're more apt to, for their circle first choice, they're going to pick the Republican, and they're going to pick the most conservative. And by the time they get to number 4, they're going to pick the least conservative or the most liberal, right? And so they vote all 4 times because they know that it's a blue district, it's a Democrat district. The Democrats, on the other hand, they might rank all 4 too, but they're going to do it the opposite. And when during the rounds of counting, the ballots are eliminated when that person has the lowest, that candidate has received the lowest number of votes. So after the very first count, whoever receives candidate that receives the lowest number of votes, they're going to be pulled out. Well, that in that blue district, it's going to be that Republican on the right. And the second round, it's going to be the next most conservative is going to be pulled out. So in the end, the Republicans voter, their third choice is going to get counted, and their fourth choice, if it goes that far. They stop the tabulation once a candidate receives 50% of the remaining ballots plus one vote.
Mhm.
So that Republicans' votes probably are all going to be counted, at least in number 3, maybe number 4. Whereas the Democrat voter, they're probably only their first or second is going to get counted. And so what you have is an unfair situation in my mind. I think it's unfair because of the groups we talked about that are disenfranchised, but I'm also really concerned because it actually gives an unfair advantage to the minority political persuasion person because more of their votes will be counted by the end than the person in that area that is of the majority political persuasion. And that's mathematically how it works. So in summary, I guess you could say the people in a district who choose the least electable candidates in the first couple of rounds, they are the people whose votes will tip the scale and choose the winner in the end. So my question, if you're a Republican in a Democrat district where a majority of people are Democrats, why should those Republicans have that much power to tip the scale? And vice versa, in a Republican district, why would a Democrat have that much power that in the end they get to tip the scale? It's because they're getting more votes and their votes go all the way to the last round. So, and in
people
the
who
end,
just choose one, people who only want to choose one or not for this system, they have, it's kind of like Russian roulette. Like they don't know if their vote's even going to get counted if it's not among the top vote getters.
yes. And one of the things we're finding too, because polling here showed that a lot of people were not happy with it. It was confusing and they want to get rid of it. So the 8 million, we have about 8 millions come into the state from outside to try to keep ranked choice voting, or we call it RCV for short. They're using some very misleading information.
They are.
They're indicating two things: that if we get rid of it, it's going to restrict people's freedom, and that it will force people to have to choose a political party, and that's simply not true. They're indicating because we had a closed primary before, but we didn't have a closed primary before. What we have is a semi-open primary, and if you are an unaffiliated voter, you're undeclared, nonpartisan, independent voter, you have the choice to pick either a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. So you're not restricted. And
we've always had independents running. We've always had other parties running.
we do. And actually in our state, I think we're a little bit different than other states in that 63% of our voters aren't registered with either party. So in that Republican primary, for instance, it's not just Republicans picking that winner. There are a bunch of unaffiliated voters picking that winner. Same with the Democrat ballot. So it is very open, and there's nothing to keep someone. Also, if somebody was a Republican and they were dying to vote in a Democrat on the Democrat ballot, they just have to plan ahead 30 days and change to, for instance, undeclared, and then they'd be able to do that. It wouldn't make sense for Republicans to help choose the Democrat nominee, just like it wouldn't make sense.
I've seen that they've done that. The Democrats have come on over to do that for certain reasons, and they're able to do that. So
They are, but
yeah.
some people are saying, well, we want the jungle primary because they're saying I'm a Democrat and I want to vote on the Republican primary, or I'm a Republican and I want to vote on the Democrat primary. But really, does that make sense? Because our US Constitution gives us, in the First Amendment, it recognizes our freedom to associate in groups. And so parties are just made up of people, right? There's nothing, all that powerful. In fact, I think in so many ways, the opposition, the ones that want to keep ranked choice voting, are trying to make the parties out as villains and very controlling and powerful.
Yeah.
And they're really not. They're just made up of people.
Well,
They
yeah.
don't
And I
they
think
don't control who
Alaskans,
runs.
yeah.
They don't control who runs, and they don't control the voters. All they can do as volunteers is try to advocate for one candidate as opposed to another, but they don't have all the power that some people are assuming. And then in our case, 63% of the voters are helping pick whoever those nominees are. But it wouldn't make sense for a Republican to vote in Democrat, just like it wouldn't make sense for a member of the Kodiak Chamber of Commerce to vote in the Wasilla Chamber of Commerce's Board of Elections, would it? Or up in Fairbanks for a member of Golden Valley Electric Association to be able to vote in the Matanuska Electric Association. It doesn't make sense. So there's a reason, and the Constitution recognizes our right and ability and freedom to organize and associate together. So we do have a provision, though, if you plan 30 days ahead, that you can pull out of that. You can change your registration if you really want to vote in the other ballot. So there's even a provision for those that are party affiliated, but the unaffiliated, they are free, and the party affiliated, they are free too. They just have to plan 30 days in advance. And I'll say, yeah, it takes a little more effort for the party people to change, but based on the Constitution's our freedom to associate, I think it's worth that extra little effort. And if they have to plan ahead 30 days, so be it. They still have the freedom and they can take those steps.
Yeah. I have to say as Alaskans, I think we're independent and we don't want any parties controlling us and we don't want dark money and we're kind of fed up with parties in general. I mean, all the bickering and all that, all the toxic tribalism. And so I can see why we voted it in. And then and I wasn't super passionate either way. I didn't vote for it, but I was just kind of like, let's see how it goes. And now with all the deception happening, more and more deception happening, I'm more, I guess, invigorated more than ever before to get this information out because it seems like the money is overwhelming the regular people's voice. And they're saying the exact opposite thing of what is actually true and expecting people to believe it. And so, it's really frustrating when you feel like people can buy people's minds and people's votes just airtime and things like that. But that's what happens when we're not informed and when we're not, talking about these issues.
Right. And the only reason it passed in 2020 was dark money provision that they added, the campaign financing. And people now were furious because they feel like they got tricked. Here, they were claiming they were getting rid of dark money, but they were actually using dark money for that marketing. And now again, in their ads, they're claiming that those who want to get rid of ranked choice and go back to the one person, one vote system that we had before, that that group is special interest in using dark money, which is hilarious because
there's no money on that side.
No, there's less. A week or so ago, there was less than $100,000, and it's all grassroots. It's all Alaskans.
And the signatures that Alaskans signed just to get it on the ballot to vote it off, right?
Yes.
So that was real people signing their signatures,
Right, and they were not using paid workers. It was dedicated, concerned, passionate Alaskans who said, this is not good for our state. Let's put it up to the voters. They volunteered their time and they worked hard. So it's really ironic, that they're picking it's like the very thing that those who want to keep RCV, what they are actually guilty of, I guess I would say. They're accusing the other side. It's like,
they're projecting.
What's
pot
going
calling
on
the
here?
kettle black, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely.
But we will see how it goes, and and that could impact the direction of the state. So it actually is a really big deal because we already saw it impact our in the state Senate. The state Senate, the previous session, I was the majority leader, and after a ranked choice voting election, the Senate shifted to the left. So, and I was in a minority. So it is, it's a real thing, and hopefully Alaskans will get educated, despite the fact that there's very, very little money on the get rid of RCV side.
And from what I understand, there are Democrats that are opposing this as well, right? I mean,
there are some. Now, I have not researched this, so somebody definitely fact check it. I'm not going to claim it, but someone mentioned to me that in Colorado, which is a blue state, Democrats are very opposed to it there. In our state, it would be natural inclination if you're in a red state, if you're of a blue affiliation, you're probably going to want it because it will help pull things your direction.
Because we tend to shift red most of the time in our state. Is that why?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I
But
think
that could easily change for them as well. I mean, because this could cut both ways.
it could absolutely. And, You know, I believe Mark Begich initially, 4 years ago, came out against it, and the Democrat Party was not speaking in favor of it. But it did help them in the election, at the federal level, help them where they wanted that to go. So I think they're much more supportive of it now. They're not speaking out against it. So it's
Yeah.
every voter is going to have to get up to speed. But you know, one of the things that I think may help get rid of it is there will be ranked choice voting on this ballot, and there will be 8 candidates for president to rank.
Wow.
People are going to walk in and they're going to see names and they're going to be, man, I didn't research this. What, what am I going to do? They're
Mm.
also going to be ranking for the congressional seat, a state Senate seat in half the districts and all the House districts. So they're actually going to be ranking. The ballots are longer. I will also say we spent triple in 2022, the cost to run the elections and the education. I just got a big, fancy, nice 8.5 by 11 card stock flyer from the Division of Elections to make sure our household knew how it works and what to
Mhm.
expect. So the education for ranked choice voting is much more
Yeah.
needed than just regular voting.
And then the tabulation system, it takes a long, long time, and you're tied to those machines. Now I know we've used machines in the past, but there are people that are, concerned about voter integrity and want to get away from that. It's going to be really, really difficult, if not impossible, to get away from that if we have continued ranked choice voting.
Yeah, it takes a computer to tabulate it. It's because it is pretty complex. And we actually, voters, have the right, I'm sorry, candidates, if an election is within a certain percentage or something or votes, the candidate has a right to ask for a hand recount. So that's going to be very difficult. We've had races in the last few years where someone won by 1 vote, someone won by 7 votes. And so those go through a recount process. How are you going to do that if you have to use a computer? We didn't have a race where we had to do that in 2022. That could happen this year, but when you have to rely on a computer and you can't double check it and audit it,
Yeah.
the hand count, that's concerning too.
Yeah. We had the one thing people aren't mentioning is enough, I don't think, is that we had the lowest voter turnout,
Oh,
I believe,
yes.
since statehood,
Yes.
since
Yeah. And
ranked choice voting came out. Mhm.
when I was talking about disenfranchising group, it does suppress votes and low turnout. So
Mhm.
if we want more people to use their voice, I think we'd be wise to go back to 1 person, 1 vote, but we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see what the electorate decides.
Yeah.
We'll go.
Don't boycott this because you don't like ranked choice, right? Now is the time to engage. And I
Yeah,
feel
and if you
like,
have question, and I would encourage people too, because what I've done is I've made, I think it's about 10 or so little clips. They're between 30 seconds and 90
Mhm.
seconds, and they're on my Senator Shelley Hughes Facebook page. And so you can learn a little bit of the concerns and reasons why ranked choice
Mhm.
voting, the system is problematic.
Yeah, thank you for making those. That's really helpful. And can you talk a little bit about, we do have a ballot measure 1. So I know nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear more about it.
Okay.
And I am opposing it, and I think at the same time I think it has a high chance of passing because I think it's a little trickery that is happening because what it has 3 parts. One is to raise the minimum wage over the next few years. My understanding is that there is hardly a business or company that doesn't already pay higher than the minimum wage because there's a workforce shortage, and to fill vacancies, they have to pay something decent. So it's really not needed for raising the minimum wage. And for an employer, when you do raise wages when they aren't in a position, maybe that's a new business starting out, if they have to pay somebody more, it might mean they have to let somebody go. So it's really better to let the employer figure that out. And
Mhm.
nobody's forcing anybody to take a particular job. So,
Right.
there's that freedom. The
Right.
second part of it, and I think people, that first part will probably grab people. Oh, inflation's so high, we can't have somebody making so little. We need to vote for this. So
Right.
that's why I think it'll pass. But the second and third part are the parts that are really concerning to me. Um, the second part requires employers to provide sick leave. Even a tiny, tiny, tiny company that might have 1 employee or 3 employees. So they have to provide more sick leave if it's more than 15 employees. I think it's 50 some hours, 56 hours or something. And then if they have fewer than 15, it's 40 hours. But again, now you're putting a mandate on a company where they might, especially a new startup that's going to struggle with that. And when they do that kind of thing, it means they're not going to have the dollars to invest in the equipment
Mm-hmm.
or in hiring another employee, those kind of things that they need. So we're putting pressure and trying to box in employers. I don't think we should be doing that. The
Yeah.
third part is probably very concerning to me because I think it's going to impact faith-based employers.
Mm.
It impacts freedom of speech because it's I don't remember, I don't want to mess up because I don't know how exactly it's worded, but it um, basically says an employer cannot require an employee to attend a meeting that has political or religious content.
Mm.
And so that's concerning. An employer, there's a culture in every business, and some cultures, part of when they come in, they have prayer in the morning before they begin
Mm-hmm.
their day, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps politics does matter on a certain issue that's really core and important to the mission of that company or organization.
Right.
So I think we're treading in an area that is trampling on freedom of speech, and so I that's a concerning area too. But like I said, I think it's likely to pass because there's not an organized group that is out there educating people and opposing it. And I think it was designed to sneak those second and third things in
Yeah.
actually. Because like I said, the minimum wage thing resolves itself and we don't really need to do
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's best to let the markets, self-select, and we
yeah,
can do that, we can do that within our choices that we make individually, but when the government takes those choices away from us, we don't realize that sometimes the alternative is zero, nothing.
yeah,
There's no job for you, and also inflation goes up, and, things are we start complaining about how high the cost of everything is. Well, these things lend themselves to one another, we
yeah.
don't
So my
voting.
recommendation So
Mhm.
my recommendation is no on ballot measure 1, no to demanding employers to do this or that, and no to restricting them to having conversations on political or religious things with their employees. And then so that'd be a no on 1, and then yes on 2, yes to get rid of ranked choice voting. No
Yes,
on
okay,
1,
I
yes on 2.
agree. Well, stay tuned for part 2 of my conversation with Senator Shelley Hughes. And as always, check the show notes to learn more about ranked choice voting and other topics that we've talked about here today. Stay brave, and I'll see you next time.